a biblical perspective on life, culture, and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
This is Andrew McLennan. One of the great challenges in modern society is what to do with men. Where do men fit in? Who are they? What's their role in society? And this has also seeped into church culture today, and men are struggling to find their place even in the church. That's why it's always encouraging to hear about a ministry which is reaching men, equipping men, and empowering men to be everything that God has called them to be. Now, one of these ministries is called Momentum Australia, and the founder, Des Kennedy, joins me today in the studio. Welcome, Des.
It's great to be here.
It's great.
It's good.
It's great to have you here, Des. As I said in the introduction, men's ministry today is a challenge. Tell me the story of Momentum Australia. How did it start?
Well, it's an amazing ministry, and I'm just so blessed that God's let somebody like me do it, for example. It started about 4 years ago, and I happened to live in Port Macquarie, and I was travelling around going to men's groups down there, and I went to one, and in that group was Werner, who's the general manager of Rima in Port Macquarie, and we started to talk, and we said we should get together for a coffee, and so we met for a coffee, and we were sitting talking about what we could do, how God was going to lead us, and he said, well, your heart's for men. Why don't you do a men's show in Port Macquarie, just reaching out to the men? And I said, I know nothing about radio. I know how to turn one on. That's as good as I get. Yeah. But he said, no, think about it over the weekend and see how you go. And so I was actually driving up to Brisbane that next weekend. And a friend of mine who went to one of the Connect groups that I led in Queensland, he has been in Christian radio for 20 years. So I phoned this guy and I said, hey, I've got this opportunity to do a radio show in Port Macquarie. I wonder if you can give me some hints as to what to do. And he said, no. And I said, what do you mean, no? He said, well, I actually want to do it with you. And I said, man, if you're going to do this with me, you need to understand that this will draw everything you've got out of you. Yeah, it's going to be a real solid ministry. And, I believe God's going to bless it. And so, here we are now. If I can say, we're obviously on Vision Radio, which is fantastic, but we're on 45 stations, the length and breadth of Australia, from Darwin to Perth to Adelaide to Melbourne to Tasmania. But even more amazing is we put the podcast onto Spotify and so forth, and that's reaching over 62 countries around the world.
Amazing.
Now, crazy.
Now the podcast is just the radio program placed onto a podcast.
Yeah.
And there are men in 60 nations of the world listening to that podcast.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
Tell me some of the nations that just really surprise you that there are people listening to your podcast in.
Well, there's Islamic countries, countries like Syria, Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia itself, but just everywhere, all the African countries, Kenya, just South America, just you name it, that's there. You'd expect it to be in the US. You expect it to be in Ireland, because that's where I'm from, and certainly Australia, but just to have all this massive countries where men are reaching out, because there's nothing for them where they are. Yeah. And so it's amazing.
It's a great story, Des. And I want to encourage our listeners with this fact. How old were you when this all started?
Well, I'm not sure I'd give my age away, but we started 4 years ago, and I'm 70 now, so at 66.
So you were 66. Now, this is really encouraging because, let's face it, in the modern world, some people when they hit 50, maybe 55 even, start to feel like they're almost unemployable. Some industries, they want someone younger, someone better looking, more energetic maybe. And you, at the age of 66, God gave you a new path in life, and it's just being blessed, and it's growing, and it's still going. And it sounds like it's going to go for another 25 years.
Yeah, well, good well to. Actually, it's interesting. I was talking to a pastor in Brisbane at the weekend, and he had been in his church for 26 years, and he started at 30, so he was mid-50s. And he got up in front of all the crowd that were there, and he said, I could coast for the next 10 years and run this church just, coasting. He said, there's no way I'm going to do that after I've just heard from Des, because that same reason, here I am, 70, almost 71, got lots of energy. I love what I do. I love the way God blesses it. I love to speak at men's groups. Yeah, I just love what I'm blessed to do. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's really good. And you're obviously based in Port Macquarie for all of our New South Wales listeners, and you're gracing our studios today. But let me ask you a question. What do you think the 3 biggest issues are facing men today? The 3 biggest issues facing men today.
One of them, the clearest one, by the way, is simple, and that's identity. Men today find it very difficult to find out what their true identity is. And we know that having identity in Christ is so important because that gives you a solid foundation rather than a rocky foundation. I mean, I know in my world, when I was in the corporate world, my identity was who I was. I was general manager of technology at Qantas. That's who I was. That was my identity. And the moment I left Qantas, I didn't get phone calls. I didn't get invitations to dinner. I was depressed because that was my identity.
Because you were quite senior in Qantas, weren't you? You were up in the corporate ladder.
Yeah.
Living the life, getting paid well, being rewarded.
All those things.
Yeah.
But let me tell you a story about that, because I became a Christian many years later from that. And so I can remember having a cruiser in Sydney, which I owned, and I had a sports car and a house and all those things. And I remember one Friday night sitting at the back of this cruiser, waiting for other people to arrive. I had a Cuban cigar. I had a glass of red wine. I had beautiful music playing in the background, sitting in this lovely boat. And I can remember saying to myself, is this all there is? I had everything, but I had nothing.
Yeah.
Now I've got nothing, but I've got everything. It's amazing, and people listening here maybe not be Christians. Let me tell you, people tell you the Christian life is not worth living, but let me tell you, having somebody live for 56 years, wherever it was, until I became a Christian, I could not compare my life now with what my life was like in the corporate world or in any of that space. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's like Jesus said, if you lose your life, you'll find it.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you hang on to your life, you'll lose it. And the reason I asked if you're in the corporate ladder, and because you're obviously quite successful, and you've touched on something, I think people's success, be it financial or job, career, business, status, fame, these things can sort of satisfy people to a degree, can't they? But they're just a crutch, aren't they? Because they don't last forever.
And also you want more. You get a BMW, you want a bigger BMW, you want a boat, or you want whatever it is, bigger house, or and so you go onto that ladder that never will satisfy because you'll never have everything that you want. So the identity thing is the first of those 3.
Yeah.
Right? The second one is loneliness.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, whenever men get into, there's a reason why suicide is so high and prevalent with men. And the reason is that they don't have some close buddy alongside them that they can just talk to, they can sow into their lives and do life better. And so we encourage in Momentum every man, Christian, non-Christian, whoever you are, get somebody alongside you. Find some mate who you can do life with, and then it could be fishing. It doesn't matter what it is, but that person is your go-to person. So when you feel depressed, you feel suicidal, you feel anxious, you feel traumas come into your life. Maybe it's health issues, whatever that looks like. You've got this one buddy who you can go to, and that's so key. So for me, I have 3 guys who are my go-to guys. They keep me accountable. That's so important too, because we all can go off the rails. But also, I'm a mentor for them and they're a mentor for me. And that's key too. Yeah. So loneliness, believe it or not, there's so many married men who are lonely.
Yeah. That's so true. Have you seen that movie? It wasn't a massive movie. It came out about 10 or 15 years ago, Man, I Love You.
Yes, I know of it. I haven't seen
There's
it.
There's a truth to that movie, isn't there? And that also is about a dude who's getting married and he realizes he doesn't have any friends to be his best man. Yeah. And he goes on a journey to try and find a best friend. And it kind of touches a chord, I think, in modern society. Like you said, there's a lot of, he had a girlfriend, but he didn't have a male friend, a mate who he could just hang with and just do life with.
And it stems from like Australia and marriage too, because, in Australia, whenever you get married, you isolate yourself. You go off with your wife and you have kids and you do whatever you do. But quite often, you don't have that close bond. You maybe go to the pub and you got mates at the pub. That's different, right? But having one guy who's your go-to person, and And, as I said, I have 3 guys who count on me as their go-to person. So whenever they're in strife, I'll get a phone call, 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, and, we'll have a good, deep conversation about what's going on in their world. Now, the third thing you talked about, the trouble for men, is pornography.
Wow.
Pornography is hugely prevalent. It's prevalent in the church. It's prevalent in pastors. It's prevalent right throughout our society. Do you know children as young as 3 or 4 are viewing pornography? They get their father's iPhone. Man. They know how to unlock it. And the father has images on that phone that will be delved into that child's mind forever.
Man. I didn't know this. I've never even thought of that. That's horrible.
Yeah, and it's prevalent. I mean, children 13 or 14 are regularly accessing pornography, and it totally destroys their concept of manhood. It totally destroys their concept of sexual relations with a partner. It totally destroys their view of women and the value that women bring in their world. And so, there's lots of courses that have been around for years to help with that. But, get alongside somebody who will hold you accountable. And there's some simple things we can do. Like, for example, where do most people view pornography? The answer is in their bedroom. So if you want to overcome that, what do? You leave your iPad out in the lounge room. You don't bring it into your bedroom. Yep. And those simple things, mind things, are real for Christians, non-Christians, young people, older people.
Yeah.
The spread is just crazy. There's something like, I can't remember, something like 600 million pages of pornography on the internet.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's just so pervasive.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was growing up, there was magazines in the in the supermarkets or in the newsagents, right?
Yeah.
And they're all wrapped in plastic. You couldn't open them.
Yeah.
Not today.
Yeah.
It's just so prevalent. It's crazy.
So true and so sad.
Yeah, it's terribly sad.
It's awful, Des. But well, you've nailed those 3 questions. I mean, you just boom, boom, boom. And all 3 of those points you've made just make so much sense. And I just want to remind our listeners of the ministry. It's called MomentumAustralia.org. That's MomentumAustralia.org. And through that website, you can find out where the radio program is aired in Australia and also where the podcast link is. And I can just tell God has used you, just by listening to you, Des, I know God is using you to touch so many men all around the world. And it's a great privilege and a great honor for us to speak with you today, Des. And I want to thank you so much for joining us on 2020 today. That's
really cool. It's lovely to be here. And I just encourage all your male listeners, just seek help if you need help. We have a care line, 1-800-000-MEN. Very easy to remember. God really bless us.
Say that again, Des.
1-800-000-MEN.
000-MEN. What a great name. How'd you get that number? That's the best number ever.
1-800-000-636. And also we have YouTube. So we're also on YouTube. So we take a lot of our older videos, audios, and we've converted them to the video. And so they're now on, if you search for Momentum for Men on YouTube, you'll see the videos there. There's about 10 of them up already. So,
and there's a link on your website to your YouTube page. A link on the website,
absolutely.
So I would encourage everyone to go to your webpage and through there get your podcast link, your YouTube link. And Des, honestly, it's a great privilege to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.